that enriching note, we're now about to begin with our panel discussion and on a very interesting topic. Now, after gathering some valuable insights from Mr. Vakil, we now move forward to another important topic pertaining to the cluster redevelopment in South Mumbai. South Mumbai has large pockets of buildings that are over 80 to 90 years old, and a lot of these have served their residents well. But now are they ready and are also ready to be demolished and reconstructed, and that can lead to creation of better utilization of the FSI with improved infrastructure. Now that leads to many questions surrounding the redevelopment of these buildings. What are the advantages? What might not work in our favor? What are the legalities encompassing these decisions? It is time to answer all the questions, and with that, I'd like to invite our eminent panel members to come forward and deliberate on these questions. Our panel host, Mr. Ghulam Zia, Executive Director, Research and Advisory, Retail and Hospitality, Knight Frank. May I also invite Mr. Anil Harish, Partner, DM Harish and Company. Ms. Radhika Patil, Senior Vice President, Business Concepts, HBS Realtors. Mr. Binoy Samantha, Head, Architecture and Building and Design, STUP Design Forum. And Mr. Dhananjay Patil, Associate Principal Architect, STUP Consultants. Let's have a huge round of applause for all our eminent panel members. And with Ghulam Zia to start the proceedings of the discussion.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, the topic that we're going to discuss today is relatively new compared to many other schemes that the government has come up with. A quick one on the history. On one side, while developing this city has been a big challenge because as we heard just a short while back, it's a landlocked city that we are handling, and availability of land is a big problem. And with that comes challenges. One of them is obviously slums, and the other is older and dilapidated buildings which are completing the lifetime. And the trouble that we are talking about is finding land to develop in this landlocked city where there are a couple of these opportunities available, whether it is slums or older buildings. Now, so far as slums are concerned, we have seen it has the slum rehabilitation schemes that have come in the city are about a decade and a half old, almost about 14, 15 years. We have seen these schemes coming up, and whatever have we seen under the slum rehabilitation has actually evolved over a period of about a decade and a half. On the other side, the cluster development schemes are hardly half a decade old and are still shaping up. So obviously it's going to take some time for us to even understand this subject better and visualize or try to work out the hindrances that we face during the course. So to say the least, this is something which is evolving. It is just about begin. So by the time it takes a good shape, it's going to take time, and perhaps another decade or so will be clear on which way are we heading on this cluster redevelopment program. I'm very happy. The panel that we have here is a pretty balanced panel. On one side, we have town planners and architects who actually understand the problems that city faces for the long term, from the long-term perspective. On the other side, we have legal help with us to also highlight the issues that one can face from both sides, from the current owners and from the future owners or the developers, etc. And on the other side, we also have a developer on the panel who also will help us understand what are the issues that a developer faces while developing it, and also what challenges and excitements do developers see in taking up these development programs. With that small backdrop, I would straight away throw the dice open for the panelists to start sharing their thoughts. Well, to begin with, we all understand that any kind of redevelopment, whether it is SRA or cluster redevelopment, simply means increasing FSI. Why? Because you have to really compensate for whatever free housing that you have to create. And any increasing FSI means burden on the city infrastructure. So with that, I would want one of the panelists to actually start this whole dialogue about what challenges do we face while throwing up any of these schemes for development of the city. So do I begin with you, if you can throw some light on the master planning requirements of any such scheme to actually succeed?
Sure, thank you. Coming from a background of a company which has been dealing infrastructure development for last 50 years, we have just completed 50 years in this country, and starting from the first building of BRC that we had come as structural engineers, and now getting into diverse departments of development, we are actually looking at the biggest problem of any growth or redevelopment is infrastructure. A city constitutes of at least around 40% of the development which is non-residential. And unless you augment those 40% infrastructure, your 60% land which you are preserving for residential is just going to be shelter without being serviced. As we had initially a discussion with Dr. Indu, who actually mentioned the need of institutes, the similar need of many other social amenities, infrastructure development like roads, water, sewage, electricity to sustain ourselves. Yes, we have to think out of the box to come up with the solutions, and we have to be more sustainable. There are various technologies that has evolved over years where we can be eco-sustainable. We can generate our own energy. We have alternate source of energy that we can develop. We can preserve water, conserve water. We know that whatever water we use, 80% of the water goes down the drain. Conserve those 80% water, recycle them. It means if I can preserve 80%, I can grow 8 folds with the same water which I get in my house. So there's no problem about water, there's no problem about electricity, and there's no problem about sewage, because I can always recycle that thing and use it for my own generation. The problem which we actually have is about roads. Where do I need land? Where do I get land for? Because that's the only one that is above ground. Everything else can be underground or above your buildings. And challenge is to come together. Smaller the developments coming in pieces, in smaller cluster, bigger are the problems. Bigger the cluster, smaller are the issues. Yes, there are financial issues we have when we combine. It's difficult to combine bigger plot development and have a bigger cluster development. But as development, as planners, we feel it's important to unite and come up with a more comprehensive development plan rather than coming with a smaller cluster development plan, limiting our boundaries to our own boundary wall and not looking beyond. Parking, roads, definitely is something that concerns us. Better the roads, higher the traffic. That's also something that we need to look at. It's not just that having road helps us solving the problem. So we actually have to look after traffic management as well as the providing infrastructure. We are the consultants for the Eastern Link that has just been coming up here, and we know the significance of and how it's going to influence the development over here. The technology used for faster development has already been done. We have seen such a huge road coming in short time is an achievement by itself. These are all thanks to the technologies that we are coming up with in this industry. So the industry has made themselves aware of technologies, but what we have to do is unite ourselves so that we can have a better infrastructure. I'm sure realtors will be more focused towards looking at residential property because that is what they need to sell. But I feel as a planner, unless you serve them and does not provide them with shelter, this realty values will probably not grow the way we would like to grow.
Good, great, thank you. That was a great insight. Now, since we are still at infrastructure, and what we spoke about from the master planning angle was more from the exterior perspective about the overall city development, etc. Before we jump over to the other topic related to the subject, I would quickly want, some understanding on the infrastructure that has to be created within those developments. Like, for example, what we have seen typically in SRAs, you have small developments of, say, about 20, 25 tenements also possible. You can actually create a space which is cluttered, which would have perhaps vertical development with hardly any greenery, gardens or facilities, etc. for the occupiers, both the project affected people as well as the free sale component that we're talking about. So here comes obviously a big challenge that if you're talking about development, how do we create the right infrastructure for the occupant of the property? So whether it is the people who have been the earlier occupants or the people who are going to buy these things. So with that, I would want the a view from the developer side with, I'm sure Radhika will have a lot to talk about as to how do they infuse life in these developments to make it actually livable for both sides of stakeholders.
Hi, firstly, I would like to take this opportunity to thank SMART for allowing us to be here and selecting all of us as the panel. It's a great opportunity to connect with everyone. Coming back to Zia's question and a little more on the gentleman's infrastructure views, I basically firstly want to say with regards to the project that we cannot get away from development or shy away from it. We will have to face the issues because in a city like Mumbai, which is cosmopolitan metro city, we are always going to have people coming in. It's the city of dreams. So we will have to build and build and build. And the only way to build in Mumbai is to build upwards because there is scarcity of land. So it's a great opportunity that the authorities have offered in terms of cluster development. They have incentivized the developer, to take these kind of, I wouldn't call it slums anymore. I loved your word, the informal housing, as you said. So the informal housing and rehabs and the free sale. So what we do, Zia, is when we get the opportunity for development of a particular cluster, we make sure that we have similar opportunities created for both, whether it's a free sale or whether it's, rehab. We insist that we have enough car parking spaces so that they don't put further load on cities' infrastructure. We ensure that there are better playgrounds for children and for everyone, better amenities, better facilities for both. If it's a composite building, then we have to provide common ones. But where we have larger pieces of land, then we can actually divide them and provide for separate amenities also.
Great. Well, now what we're talking about is two sides of the story. On one side, we have these old buildings on which we have to reconstruct and rehouse those who are living in those dilapidated environments, etc. And on the other side, we have the other stakeholders, which are the developers who are coming in as a mediator to ensure that the environment improves, to ensure that there's a livable condition for both the old housing owners as well as the new occupiers who are coming to buy these properties which are going to be in free sale. Now, I'm sure there will be lots of back and forth, possibly some amount of friction. From the legal perspective, Mr. Harish, how can we quickly have a chat on what are the issues that both parties face while getting into this kind of an arrangement?
Redevelopment, of course, is absolutely essential. The cluster redevelopment policy was first initiated in about 2007 as part of the Maharashtra State Housing Policy and then was embodied in the Development Control Regulations, being Regulation number 33-9. There is a detailed appendix which sets out all the factors that have to be taken into account for the purposes of the cluster redevelopment. But when we actually come to going ahead with the transaction, you have to see the interplay of the different forces. There is firstly the owner of the land or those who are going to carry on the redevelopment. Then there are the tenants or the occupants in the property. There will be the persons who are going to put in the finance for the project. And then there are the government authorities which actually have to give the approvals. It is therefore going to be like other developments are, that you have to think of everything. You have to think forward over the next 3, 5, 7 years because you have to take into account the requirements of all these different people. That there will be the landowner who has to deal with a developer who's going to bring in finance and know-how. Then there will be the applications to the government. We know how long those approvals have taken in the last few years. And what happens till then? Is it that all the occupants are going to be bound, people's situations change? There may be some people who agree right now, they may not be there a few years later. Suppose some of them transfer away their rights. What happens in those situations? And when people have to be given alternative accommodation to move out, then what are the costs of those? What are the tax situations that arise? And then when people actually come back in, what will be the stamp duty implications, the formation of the cooperative society, and especially in view of the new capital value system of property taxation, the high maintenance costs that there will be, particularly in a high-rise building. There is provision in Appendix 3A for a high-powered committee which will say that the developer has to provide for the housing, for the costs for the rehab personnel who will be allowed to stay on without having to pay costs for 10 years, but then some burden will fall on the new persons who come in. So it's going to be a financial cost and it's going to be a legal cost, and everyone needs to be sure of their own rights and obligations over the period of time for which the development takes place.
Great. So what we are then talking about, it's an angle of commercial viability for those who are currently living in these old and dilapidated buildings as well. Obviously, they are there because financial constraints that they're facing. So if we are constructing properties or giving them houses which are high on maintenance, it's a big challenge. So would you have a quick thought on is it possible really from architectural side or technology side to ensure that the maintenance costs remain under check for those who are, if I can call them project affected people or the people to be rehoused? Is there some technological solution that you have in mind, please?
As per this cluster development, one thing is the developer has to prepare the corpus fund for 10 years of maintenance. So that is one provision which is there in the development control rules. And there can be further ways to reduce the cost of maintenance by going more horizontal, but which will again require more ground coverage. And it is again, there are some constraints in development control rules. So going more horizontal will definitely help in reducing the overall maintenance cost, going sustainable by going for STP for recycled water, where we can avail 85% of the water recycled for requirements like flushing, landscaping. Energy, we can make use of renewable energy like solar power, solar water heaters. So I think there are some sustainable ways which in the initial capital cost for these all sustainable provisions is really a bit higher side, but in the maintenance, in the operations, it will definitely bring down the cost of the maintenance.
Good. Here, I would want the focus back on Radhika. It's also about whatever we've been discussing. It's a very tightrope walk that any developer has to really perform, because on one side there are the project affected people or the people to be rehoused who are to be kept in good humor, who are to be managed. On the other side, you also have to go by market requirements. You also, like for example, we just heard that possibly you would go horizontal, but obviously that's not the answer in a city like Mumbai where everything has to be vertical. So in that kind of a conflict, won't you feel the developer has to play an extremely important role to keep the stakeholders in good stead? Like for example, I'm sure you would be doing a great lot of programs to connect with your current owners, etc. How do you ensure that you keep them on your side throughout the duration of the development?
Zia, I think the answer to this question is very, very simple, and it's all about transparency. It's very important that, first of all, the initiative taken by the authorities is great, but it has to be put into light, it has to be executed, and the one who executes this is the developer. So I think that starts with that. Now, developer is not only a builder today as far as redevelopment is concerned. He is become more like a father for the project, So there are various aspects. It's not only about just making a building and selling it off or just housing the existing people around everywhere. Every single thread has to be looked at. So beginning with, say, the land acquisition part, where you try and gain trust of the people you're going to rehouse. They need to have immense faith in you in terms of, how open you are, how transparent you are. You just cannot hide anything from anyone because everybody is today aware, today's customer, today's people, everyone is well read. They've seen everything. There's redevelopment going on throughout this city. And they know, so there is no way anybody can hide anything. The best is to actually, the way we function, honestly, at HBS, is we walk hand in hand because we believe that they are our stakeholders. So we walk hand in hand with them. From the beginning, we share every single data, whether it's planning, the area that we give them, what we are going to offer, and what is available as per the bylaws, what is permissible in every single development. So it's all clear, so there are not false promises. It's very, very transparent. So I think that's the first step in terms of starting with any project, in terms of gaining trust. Post which then obviously, depending on the projects, we finalize what consultants would be working for a particular project. So which are the apt consultants and how we can offer the best. Yes, sustainability, green buildings, everything is taken care of because that in some sense is also made mandatory by the government now in most cases. And we have MOEF, we have all environmental clearances in place, so it works. So that's how it goes on. Post which then there comes construction. So construction and making the building actually becomes 30% of the entire development scenario, That's how it goes.
Well, in between, obviously, there is a very challenging time when, as Radhika was talking about, where the stakeholder, very important stakeholder, is the person who has to be rehoused. On one side, there is a communication program, an open channel of dialogue, as Radhika spoke about, which developers have to keep open all the time. On the other side, also their requirement during the course of development. Is there some special requirement and how master planning can help tackle the temporary residences? Because as we all know, in a landlocked place like Mumbai, you have perhaps an acre and a half or two of a cluster development to be done. And on that, if you're talking about 15 buildings to be reconstructed into one or two, getting as the contracting parlance goes, chaal jise kehte hain. If there is no chaal to do the whole thing together, there's obviously a huge challenge to do it in piecemeal and parcel by parcel. So from master planning angle or architectural angle, is there some view that you have which would help successfully develop these things within those timeline constraints?
This has been the biggest challenge in any redevelopment scheme because even as per bylaws, the first building that has to be built has to be the rehab component. And when you know that a piece of building is anyway very tight and we are going with a higher FSI of 4, that first lot which has to be taken out, that vacuum that has to be created for the new building to come is the biggest challenge. Now, there are different type of land use you're talking about. I'm not necessarily talking that cluster development is limited to residence only. I might have a residence come office, I might have only pure commercial activity, and my market has been developed over the last 30 years or 40 years, and if the moment I even have a transit facility, it is going to be difficult for me to sustain for the period of construction. This has been actually the challenge that we as planners are finding in phasing out the construction development. And yes, there is a provision in the law which says that you can have a transit accommodation within 500 meters of the development that you have, and so you might have a rented apartment for some time. The developer might look out for, or we can actually have a group transit facility that comes up on a vacant piece of land which belongs to government, and after your building is built, by law it has to be broken down. So we can use the open pieces of land available for some time till that transit facility can be provided. But if we group together, if all the realtors come together, maybe this transit facility cost can also be reduced by having this in phased manner, and this transit facility can sustain for another 10 years or 15 years, so that this could be like a rented apartment for those developers, and you can actually phase out the development, which could be booked well in advance. And yes, law does allow us to permit such development transit facilities also, and government would be more than happy to provide such piece of land for transit facilities, which necessarily need to be broken down later.
Well, that brings me to a very interesting, that reminds me of a very interesting dialogue I had yesterday. There was another affordable housing program which I was talking on. And one of the audience, somebody from the audience asked me some very smart questions, and I asked was he from, and he was from McKinsey. McKinsey was there attending that conference because they are currently the advisors for Dharavi. And the big challenge that he was talking about is this precise problem, the rehousing. And Dharavi, once again, is the most cluttered development that you can ever think of. And the big challenge he was struggling with is exactly how to make place available for development. And while discussing, something very interesting came up. I'm sure it's something which is perhaps beyond the boundary of this dialogue. And perhaps people like Pranay Bhai, etc., and many eminent people who are sitting here can actually make a step in that direction. You know, when you're talking about, and once again, another number which I pick up from Pranay Bhai, if there are 1,800 apartment buildings that you said at any given point of time, which will be under development, right? 2,400. 2,400 in the island city and Dharavi. So if you're talking about so much of redevelopment to be done, and if somebody has taken an ambitious target to actually do it in 2 decades, then the question is, how can we really do it? And then the thought, while talking to the McKinsey colleagues, came up is, can we not really use the salt pan lands for temporary development? You know, because we have all those environment-related issues and so on and so forth. So if all of them are so troubled about touching the environment as a subject, can we not really construct something on salt pan with a clear timeline that within a decade or 5 years or 8 years, all that to be demolished, and then try to rehouse all of them who are currently just creating a very, very crazy scenario that whole Mumbai, all these dilapidated buildings, SRAs evacuated, take them to the slum, to the salt pan lands, and bring them back in 5 to 7 years or perhaps 10. Can that be done? I'm sure there'll be some legal angle involved there as well. So if I can have Mr. Harish also, who's an eminent member, to give some idea, can that really be done, or what kind of protest do you see coming up if I have to even talk about it?
By and large, government policies towards housing in Mumbai have been reactive, not proactive. We know about the textile mills. The textile mills languished for decades and decades. It was only after so much thought and probably political pressure and political incentives that were given that the policies began to change. The salt pan land, again, is something which has constituted such a huge part of Bombay and the environs of Bombay, and there has been no attempt whatsoever to address those issues. There are people who own large tracts of salt pan land. Now, surely a place like Mumbai, one of the biggest and most densely populated cities in the world, should be doing something other than just extracting salt from the sea. We are supposed to be a financial center, not a salt center. But they just don't look at these issues at all. And now when you allow these problems to go on and on, just like as the tenancy problem is much greater than it was before, the slum problem is greater, the textile mills has been resolved, so the salt pan land is just another problem waiting to erupt. If you were to try and attempt to take away the salt pan lands, I think it would be a very good thing for, as you said, for the development of the city. But if you were to take it away, then those who are the owners of the salt pans will surely protest against this, and they have a right to. They would say, why should our land be taken away? If it is to be allowed to be developed, then we must be the ones to develop it. We may construct, we may give it out on rent, as was suggested, which I think is a very good idea, because there is an absurd provision in Appendix 3A that when you construct transit accommodation, then immediately after having taken back the project affected persons, to use the term that you used, after having them put them back in their old site, you have to demolish the accommodation, the transit accommodation. That just doesn't make sense. Why should you create something to demolish it again? So if you're going to use the salt pans lands, which you must, it cannot be for something temporary. It has to be something which fits into the master plan of Mumbai and is planned properly to give benefit to those who are actually the owners. Otherwise, you will face another 30, 40 years of litigation.
Okay, great. So perhaps this is one topic where debates have to begin. We have to really discuss, at least to keep those green lobbies happy, at least a temporary development to ensure that we do something about the rest of the city. Perhaps as a thought which we can leave behind. Now I was, while this whole panel discussion was going on, I was wondering, on one side, we have master planners, on the other side we have developers and architects and legal help, etc. But one side of the community or the one set of stakeholders which are not represented on this panel dialogue is most of you, the brokers, the agents, and the colleagues sitting over here. So this is one sector. I am a broker. As Pranabhai said, all of us in Knight Frank, and I have actually been as a broker, handled many of these issues which I'm sure most of you sitting over here would be facing. A couple of them we have done together. So here the question, and then because it's very, very pertinent to the most of the people over here, I would leave it for Radhika to handle. How do we keep the brokers also in this stream of development? We're talking about the subject of the day is cluster development. How do we ensure that we keep the very important stakeholders in this whole business, the brokers, also in the business?
In the business of redevelopment or their broker's business? Are
Well,
you changing business here? What are you indicating here?
We have something in common. We are constructing and they're helping us sell. So what kind of schemes, etc., that you must have thought of, that you will keep them involved as well?
Well, we have very interesting schemes actually for all the gentlemen present here. We actually call them partners for prosperity. In fact, as far as HBS is concerned, we have a dedicated brochure only to SMART today and to the fraternity sitting here who are the brokers. We call them partners for prosperity. So yes, they go hand in hand with us wherever we go. So we get development, they get business. It's as simple as that.
Great. So perhaps we have tried to touch upon all stakeholders in this dialogue, and in the brief half-an-hour schedule that was given to us, we tried to do justice to the subject, which perhaps requires a couple of days of dialogue. So with this, I would want to bring it to an end and leave the floor open for questions, if we have.